Haley Anderson was a bright, compassionate nursing student with a future full of promise. Jalen Norrix was her quiet, intelligent classmate, brilliant on paper but disturbed beneath the surface. What started as a classroom friendship spiraled into a deadly obsession that no one saw coming. When Haley's body was discovered inside Jalen's off-campus apartment, the question wasn't just why, but how the person sitting beside her every day turned into a calculated killer. As the search for Jalen stretched across the country, chilling secrets emerged. Secrets that revealed this was never a crime of passion, but a plan months in the making. Haley Anderson was a 23-year-old nursing student at Belmont University, a well-respected college in the quiet town of Edgewater. She was in her final year, preparing for a future she had carefully planned since high school. Known for her warmth and positive energy, Haley had a way of making people feel at ease. She volunteered on weekends, studied hard, and kept close to a small group of friends. Her dream was to work in pediatric care, and she was just months away from graduating with honors. Everything about Haley suggested stability, kindness, and ambition. That's what made her sudden disappearance so unsettling. On the evening of October 4th, a Thursday, Haley told her roommates she was heading to the university library to catch up on notes for an upcoming pharmacology exam. She packed her laptop and books into her backpack and left the apartment around 8:15 p.m. The weather was cool, and the streets near campus were lit and active with other students. It was a typical night, and nothing seemed unusual at first. By midnight, her roommates noticed she hadn't returned. It wasn't alarming at first. Haley often stayed late at the library or went to a cafe to study when it got too noisy at home. But by morning, her bed remained untouched. Her phone was off, and she hadn't responded to any messages. One of her roommates tried calling again, but the call went straight to voicemail. That's when they began to worry. Haley was responsible, never impulsive, and always kept in touch. Silence from her was not just strange, it was terrifying. By Friday afternoon, after checking with professors and friends and still getting no word, her roommates went to the campus police to file a missing person report. Haley's family was contacted immediately. They lived in another state and were shocked to learn their daughter was missing. Her mother, Grace Anderson, was on the next flight to Edgewater. Police began reviewing Haley's movements using campus security footage. Cameras confirmed she had never reached the library. The last clear image showed her walking past a coffee shop off campus, heading down a side street that led toward a residential complex. From there, the trail went cold. Officers canvassed the area, spoke to students, and searched nearby buildings, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, a tip came in from a student who lived in an apartment building just 5 blocks from the university. She told police that she had heard strange noises on Thursday night, yelling, something heavy hitting the floor, then complete silence. At first, she assumed it was a loud argument between neighbors and didn't think much of it. But after seeing Haley's photo on campus flyers and realizing the timing matched, she decided to speak up. Police followed the lead to the apartment building and discovered that it belonged to another nursing student, Jalen Norrix. He was in the same program as Haley and had taken several classes with her. On paper, Jalen had no criminal record and had appeared to be a quiet, reserved student. but something didn't feel right. Officers knocked on the door. No one answered. They checked with the building's management and confirmed that the unit was registered under Jalen's name. Later that evening, after securing a warrant, officers entered the apartment. What they found changed everything. In the living room, lying motionless on the couch, was Haley Anderson. She was fully clothed, her belongings placed neatly beside her. The scene was eerily calm, as though someone wanted it to look peaceful. But the medical team confirmed she was dead and early. Signs pointed to strangulation. There were no visible wounds, no sign of forced entry or a struggle, and no indication she had tried to defend herself. Jalen Norrix was nowhere to be found. The news of Haley's death spread rapidly through campus. Students were in shock. Professors were horrified, and the Anderson family was devastated. What had started as a routine study night had ended in tragedy, and now, with a killer on the run, the search for justice had only just begun. The discovery of Haley Anderson's body inside Jalen Norrix's apartment sent shockwaves through the Edgewater community. Students and faculty at Belmont University, who once felt safe walking the quiet streets near campus, were now gripped by fear and confusion. How could something so horrifying happen in a place so familiar? And why would Jalen, a fellow nursing student with no history of violence, be at the center of it? As crime scene investigators examined the apartment, several unsettling details emerged. The living room where Haley's body was found was spotless, unnaturally clean. The couch cushions had been adjusted, the coffee table wiped down, and the lights dimmed. Her backpack was zipped and placed next to her phone and ID. It was clear that whoever staged the scene wanted it to appear calm and composed, as if to hide the violence that had actually taken place. The autopsy later confirmed Haley had died from manual strangulation. There were no defensive wounds on her arms or hands, no bruising that would suggest she had fought back. This led investigators to believe she had either been caught off guard or was incapacitated before the attack. Toxicology reports showed no drugs or alcohol in her system. It was as if she had simply stopped breathing, without warning or resistance. Meanwhile, Jalen Norrix had disappeared. His phone was off, and his car was not parked at the apartment complex. Police began tracking his digital footprint, hoping for a clue. But there was nothing. His social media accounts were inactive, and there were no recent bank or credit card transactions. It became clear that Jalen had planned his disappearance. Investigators suspected he might have had a go-bag ready, cash, a fake ID, maybe even a pre-purchased bus or train ticket. This wasn't an impulsive act of violence. It was something that had been building in silence. Detectives turned their attention to Jalen's background. Raised in a neighboring state, Jalen had transferred to Belmont University 2 years prior. He kept a low profile, earned decent grades, and mostly kept to himself. Professors described him as polite but distant. Some classmates recalled he could be intense and overly focused during group projects. Others said he often seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing for long periods during lectures. Still, no one could have predicted this. What raised more red flags were the details about Jalen's past relationship with Haley. Though never publicly acknowledged, several students reported seeing them spend time together during their second year. They had worked on clinical assignments, studied together at the campus library and were often seen having coffee after class. But the friendship appeared to end abruptly. Haley had started seeing someone else, and Jalen withdrew from his usual routines. He even requested to be reassigned to a different clinical group just weeks before Haley's murder. Inside Jalen's bedroom, police found more disturbing evidence. Hidden under his bed was a spiral-bound notebook filled with erratic, obsessive writings. Entire pages were devoted to Haley, her habits, her clothing, her favorite study spots. The entries shifted from admiration to anger, and finally to rage. One page stood out. It simply read, "If she won't see me, then she'll see nothing at all." These words, scrawled in thick black ink, seemed to offer a chilling glimpse into Jalen's mindset. Detectives also found torn photographs of Haley, shredded receipts, and several identity documents, some real, others forged. They even uncovered a printed map of nearby cities, marked with circles and arrows as if he had been planning escape routes. It became evident that this crime had not been a spontaneous outburst of emotion. It had been a calculated decision, driven by obsession and delusion. The police issued a warrant for Jalen Norrix's arrest, and his face appeared on news channels across the region. Tips began pouring in, but none led to his capture. He had vanished without a trace. With Haley's family mourning and the community demanding answers, the urgency of the manhunt grew. Investigators knew they were dealing with a suspect who had prepared for this moment, and who was determined not to be found. What had started as a missing person case was now a nationwide search for a killer who had fooled everyone around him. As the search for Jalen Norrix intensified, investigators turned their focus toward understanding the motive behind Haley Anderson's tragic murder. It was clear from the evidence inside his apartment that this was not a random act. Jalen hadn't simply snapped in a moment of rage. He had planned everything, from the killing to his disappearance. To understand why, detectives needed to unravel the complex history between Haley and Jalen, and what they discovered painted a disturbing. Picture Haley and Jalen had first met during their second year in the nursing program at Belmont University. Both were intelligent, focused students, and they were frequently paired for assignments. Their friendship started casually, often built around study sessions and group projects. According to classmates, it was clear early on that Jalen was drawn to Haley. He would often wait for her after class, offer to carry her books, and made every effort to sit beside her during lectures. At first, Haley seemed to appreciate the attention. She was friendly by nature and didn't see anything unusual in his behavior. But slowly, her attitude began to shift. Friends of Haley would later tell police that she had grown uncomfortable with Jalen's increasing need for attention. He began texting her constantly, even late at night. If she didn't respond quickly, he would follow up with multiple messages. When she began dating another student, Jalen's behavior became more erratic. He would linger outside her classes, appear unexpectedly at her apartment building, and question her friends about her whereabouts. Haley, wanting to avoid drama, chose not to report him, but she did distance herself. She stopped responding to his texts, avoided places she thought he might be, and eventually asked her professors to switch her lab partner. What seemed like a quiet withdrawal on the outside was, in reality, the beginning of Jalen's spiral. His journal entries revealed how deeply affected he was by Haley's rejection. He wrote obsessively about betrayal and loss, and about how Haley had led him on. In one chilling entry, he blamed her for destroying everything good in his life. Another passage simply read, "I gave her my mind, she gave me silence." The more investigators read, the more they understood that Jalen had been living in a world of delusion. In his mind, Haley hadn't just rejected him, she had humiliated and abandoned him. He saw himself as a victim of manipulation, and his obsession twisted into resentment. Detectives theorized that he had lured Haley to his apartment under the pretense of talking or studying. Given how familiar they were with each other, it would have been easy for him to convince her to come over, especially if he acted as though he wanted closure or peace. That theory was further supported by a digital forensics team that managed to recover deleted messages from Haley's phone. Just hours before her death, she had received a short message from Jalen. "Can we talk? Just once. No drama." It appeared she had agreed, likely hoping to settle things and move on. But instead of a conversation, she walked into a trap. Adding to the disturbing nature of the case, police found evidence that Jalen had begun preparing for her death weeks in advance. One search on his laptop read, "How long it takes for a body to be found indoors." Another search included instructions on how to disappear without a trace. He had downloaded articles about fugitives, studied international travel without identification, and bookmarked websites discussing underground networks. He had even withdrawn $2,000 from his savings account in small amounts to avoid suspicion. It wasn't just murder. It was a plan built step by step, fueled by obsession and carefully masked from the outside world. While police and Haley's family struggled to come to terms with the horrifying nature of the crime, one thing became clear. Jalen Norrix had convinced himself that he had been wronged, and in that belief, he had become capable of a cold, calculated killing. Now, armed with disturbing insight into his state of mind, law enforcement pushed harder to track him down. The fear was growing. If he had done this once, what might he do next? Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of Jalen Norrix. His face was on every news channel, every missing person bulletin, and every university safety alert across the state. A nationwide manhunt had officially begun. Despite the intense search, Jalen had vanished without leaving even a whisper behind. The calm and quiet nursing student that no one had ever paid much attention to had now become the most wanted man in the region. But behind that disappearance, investigators began uncovering even darker layers of planning that revealed just how far he was willing to go to evade justice. Authorities began focusing on Jalen's digital trail. Even though his phone had been switched off since the night of the murder, forensic analysts managed to trace some of his prior online behavior. A week before Haley's death, Jalen had searched for information about countries with no extradition, treaties with the United States. He had downloaded VPN software, encrypted email tools, and searched for how to create fake identification documents. They even found traces of him visiting dark web forums, places where people exchanged information about underground travel, new identities, and border smuggling. It was chilling evidence that he had no intention of turning himself in. This was his new life now, living in shadows, away from the world that once knew him. But then a break came. A toll booth security camera on the border between two neighbouring states captured a blurry image of a man resembling Jalen, wearing a hoodie and carrying a duffel bag. While the face wasn't clearly visible, the build, hair, and gait matched Jalen's profile. This sighting reignited the investigation. Police units were dispatched to nearby bus terminals, motels, and train stations. For the first time in weeks, investigators felt like they were closing in. Yet, just as suddenly as the lead came, it went cold again. No one matching Jalen's description had used public transportation in the area. No fingerprints were found. At the bus stations, it was like chasing a ghost. Investigators began to believe he had help. Perhaps someone from the university, someone who believed in him or didn't fully understand the severity of the crime, had provided assistance. Tips poured in, including one from a woman who claimed she had seen a man matching Jalen's description, working under a fake name at a mechanic's shop 2 states away. When detectives arrived, the man had already left. As the manhunt dragged on, Haley's family was left trapped in grief without closure. Her parents couldn't bear the thought of her killer walking free, building a new life after destroying theirs. Haley's mother, Grace Anderson, began attending press conferences, speaking directly to the public and pleading for help. Her calm, tearful appeals added emotional weight to the search. She said Haley's name over and over, making sure no one forgot what had been taken. Her pain was now a part of every headline, every article, every TV segment. She refused to let Haley become just another cold case. Behind the scenes, law enforcement turned to federal agencies for help. With evidence that Jalen may have crossed state lines or intended to flee the country, the FBI joined the case. Behavioral analysts built a psychological profile suggesting that Jalen might eventually slip up due to his controlling and obsessive personality. People like him, they said, need to monitor how others see them. If he ever reached out to view news articles, social media, or old classmates, the digital fingerprint could give them a second chance at tracking him. Meanwhile, small but strange clues continued to surface. A used train ticket in Jalen's name, purchased but never used. A receipt from a gas station with a barely legible signature. A pair of discarded clothes behind a storage unit that matched what he was last seen wearing. These fragments added to the mystery. Each clue hinted that Jalen was still moving, still watching, still hiding. And through it all, the central question remained unanswered. How could a person so seemingly ordinary carry out something so monstrous and then simply disappear? The net was tightening, but Jalen Norrix was still out there, and time was quickly running out. 6 months after Haley Anderson's murder, the case had grown colder, but it was far from forgotten. Her face still appeared on campus memorial walls, pinned beside candles and letters from classmates who struggled to move on. Posters of Jalen Norrix, now branded a fugitive, still clung to street poles and post office bulletin boards, faded by sun and rain. The emotional wound remained fresh for Haley's family. And for the investigators, there was still no peace, only pressure and haunting questions about where Jalen had gone and whether justice would ever be served. Then, in a quiet town on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, a tip came in. A man at a roadside diner had noticed something strange. A new dishwasher named Daniel had no identification and paid only in cash. He worked the night shift, rarely spoke, and avoided eye contact. He wore long sleeves even in the heat. When a photo of Jalen Norrix was shown to the diner owner, the resemblance was undeniable. Surveillance footage was grainy but compelling. Authorities immediately descended on the town. When officers arrived at the diner, the man was already gone. But they weren't far behind. A receipt from a nearby gas station showed a purchase made just 30 minutes earlier. Cigarettes, water, and a bus ticket to El Paso. Surveillance cameras confirmed it. It was Jalen. His image, blurry but unmistakable, was caught one last time before he boarded the bus. Law enforcement finally intercepted him at a rest stop, 80 miles from the border. He was found sleeping in the back of the bus, face down, hood pulled tight over his head. When agents asked for ID, he had none. He gave a fake name, but it didn't matter. His fingerprints confirmed everything. After months on the run, Jalen Norrix was in custody. The news of his arrest spread rapidly. At Belmont University, classes paused for a moment of silence. Haley's parents, exhausted but relieved, finally had the closure they had long prayed for. For the investigators who had pursued every dead-end lead, the capture was a moment of vindication. But what followed was far from simple. Jalen's trial would uncover even more disturbing truths. During pre-trial hearings, prosecutors revealed that Jalen had not only planned Haley's murder in detail, but had also mapped out escape plans for months. Evidence showed that he had attempted to contact document forgers, searched for unguarded border crossings, and even studied how to fake mental illness to avoid prison time. His notebooks were filled with meticulous instructions on how to create a new life. Names he might go by, personalities he might adopt, and lies he'd tell if ever caught. Despite his silence in the courtroom, the evidence spoke volumes. Prosecutors presented pages from his journals and surveillance footage from his escape route. They highlighted the autopsy findings, the staged crime scene, and the obsessive notes about Haley. The jury, stunned by the cruelty and calculation, reached a verdict in under 3 hours. Jalen Norrix was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But even after justice was served, the damage lingered. Haley's family continued to speak at universities and public events about the importance of recognizing the warning signs of obsessive behavior. Her case became a part of psychology textbooks and lectures on criminal profiling. Her death, though senseless, became a catalyst for change in student safety policies across the state. Professors were trained to recognize behavioral red flags. Students were encouraged to report obsessive or stalking behavior, no matter how subtle. In prison, Jalen remained isolated, both physically and emotionally. He refused interviews, showed no remorse, and spoke to no one. Psychologists who assessed him described him as emotionally vacant, incapable of empathy, and consumed by the belief that he had been the victim. Haley Anderson's story did not end in that apartment. It continued in courtrooms, classrooms, and quiet dorm halls where students now walked a little more cautiously, a little more aware. Her name became a symbol, not of tragedy alone, but of the need to listen, to see, and to act before it's too late. And though justice was delayed, it had finally arrived.